U.S. intelligence saying it's seeing some signs that Iran is ready to deploy mines in the Strait. That was a CBS report. Joining us to discuss is Megan O'Sullivan, director of Harvard's Belfer Center and deputy national security advisor for Iraq and Afghanistan under President George W. Bush. Can't be a good sign if we're talking to you when we're saying that Iran won't go the way of Iraq and Afghanistan. And I would love welcome to the show. I'd love your thoughts on that matter.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, I think there are some obvious parallels that I think have captured people's imagination, and where we're back at what appears, at least until this morning, to be a game of regime change in the Middle East. But I would say that Iraq and Iran differ in some very significant ways. One, of course, is that there are no troops on the ground, no boots on the ground. That was very much the opposite in Iraq, where there were 150,000 troops in the early days of the intervention and the decapitation. But beyond that, I would highlight that the Iraqi regime was one person who kind of kept everything together. And so decapitating that regime led to its collapse. We're seeing something very different in Iran. This is a system that was made to be resilient. It was made to withstand decapitation. And it appears that that strategy or that structure is working in the sense that you've had dozens of Iranian leaders eliminated, but you see the reconstitution of power, or at least what looks like the reconstitution of power, in the naming of a new Ayatollah yesterday. So it does look like this is going to be a much harder endeavor to crack this regime than it was in Iraq. The question of what would come after a regime collapse in Iran, I think, is one that probably hasn't been sufficiently contemplated. And we start to see that in President Trump's comments today, which suggest he may be looking to define success in a much more modest way in the near term.
Megan, what do we know about Mojtaba Khomeini? Is he his father? Is he someone that is more likely to work with the West? They don't have to like us. We know that. But will he work with us, kind of like Delcy Rodriguez is thought to in Venezuela?
Well, I think that is certainly the hope of many in Washington. What I would say is we know very little about Ayatollah Khomeini's son, the new Ayatollah Khomeini. He's 56 years old, has been very close to his father all of these years. There's virtually nothing on him out there, speeches or other things on websites. He's been very quiet in that regard. It's believed that he is even more conservative than his father was. And people also point to the fact that he is wounded. We haven't heard anything from him since he's been appointed. He was wounded, it is believed, in the strikes. And we know that his wife and his father were killed in those strikes a week ago. So the sense is that he may prove to be a very difficult person to negotiate with. There was a lot of discussion among Iranian leaders within the regime about whether this was really the right person to put forward now, because if you are looking to de-escalate this confrontation with the United States, the sense was putting him in place was not sending that signal and would probably make it harder. I think in general, we're looking at his appointment as an indication that Iran is ready for confrontation that will last an indefinite period of time. Of course, that could change, but I think the signals are right now that he's a hardliner and that the Iranian leadership is consolidating power around the very powerful IRGC. Obviously, it's going to be a much weaker government than the one that existed before this bombing campaign and certainly before last June, but it doesn't look like it is a regime that is going to be making concessions of a meaningful kind to the United States or certainly to the Iranian people in the sense of real reforms in the near future.